You're listening to the TKE Nation podcast, where we strive to educate, inspire, and entertain you with tips and lessons from frauders and friends of TKE.
Hello, TKE Nation podcast listeners. It is me, Alex Swinson, and it is him, Donnie Aldrich, here with you once again this week. It is Monday, May 17th. We are releasing this podcast on Wednesday, May 19th. And if you recall last week, I was quite jolly because we were back in the office. It was a beautiful day, it was sunny, everything was going great. The Mother Nature's turned on us here.
You can't let the weather affect your mood to that rate, right? It could be something that, doesn't drive you straight to a smile, Al, but you got to come in. You got to bring the sunshine sometimes.
And this is one of those days. Seasonal affective disorder.
You, my man, have to bring the sunshine.
It's a real syndrome that, weather can make you sad.
Right, but I know that you have the mental capacity to rise above it. You're mentally tough, and we want our listeners out there to be able to rise above it. We've got a lot of great things we're going to attack coming up as we end this fiscal year, head into the next fiscal year. And we're going to need mental toughness, baby, because the challenges are going to be there. More
than 3 million cases of seasonal affective disorder in the United States every year.
I'm not disputing that it exists. I'm simply stating that mental toughness can at least play a positive role.
Oh, okay. All right. As long as we're on the same page.
Do I need to start to share with TKE Nation the great musings of Mr. Tony Robbins?
We'll just bring him on the pod. How about that?
That would be phenomenal. That would be phenomenal. He was on a podcast with Lewis Howes, who has the School of Greatness podcast, and I listened to that episode a couple weeks ago, and he really got after it on the mental toughness and our ability to push through pieces, and you can acknowledge that they exist, and then you can push right past.
Well, might have to go give that a listen. You think Lewis Howes is giving the TKE Nation podcast a shout out on his pod? Is this like a cross promotion that we're doing?
He should. He probably doesn't know enough about us yet, but he better watch out because we're coming.
We'll send him an email too. It is May here in Indianapolis, and one thing we haven't touched on yet is the gloriousness that is Indy 500 season. And we are right in the thick of it. Tracks open, practice is ongoing. I think the Grand Prix this weekend, isn't it?
It was last weekend, pal.
It was last weekend. Who won?
I have no idea.
Well, anyway, for those who have not experienced a May here in Indianapolis, you might be thinking to yourself, how great could it possibly be? It's just a silly race with cars that drive around in not an oval, a rectangle for 3 hours. Let me just tell you, you are missing out. And if there is something that could energize me through this rain and grayness, it is knowing that Indy 500 is right around the corner. I don't even know if I'm going, but just the electricity of having it in the state and there being people in the stands gives me life.
It doesn't matter if it's a town that you grew up in or a region that you grew up in, or maybe one where you went to school, or maybe it's a new region or city that you have moved to. There are special events that they have that to the outside public might not seem like they are invigorating or inspiring or something you get jazzed up about. But if you're in that community, many times you can appreciate the energy that it draws from the community and also the experience that you have in being part of the event. The Indy 500 is one of those. What most people do not realize is it is the largest sporting event. When you have 300,000 people in one spot, it is hard to explain that much humanity. And then you have a car or cars going around at 220 plus miles an hour. That is one of those things that unless you're there to see it, it is hard to understand how quickly you have to try to pick up the car out on the track to when it comes by you to even understand who's leading the race and people passing each other. Your eyes have to calibrate to that. But it is one of those bucket list pieces, and we've had a number of people in the fraternity who have said it's on their bucket list to come to the Indy 500. I definitely would recommend you at least come once. Many people who come once then come every year for the rest of their lives. And so it's a tremendous experience. I agree with you. It's a great dip into humanity. You see literally everything from people who unfortunately don't have as much to folks who have everything in life. And many times they're all dressed the same. Yeah. And the wonderful thing about the Indy 500 is much like the fraternity. We all come in and treat each other as equals and humble ourselves. You see that with the Indy 500 with with the community. Everybody's just there on race day to have a great day, to enjoy each other's company, and to celebrate the state of Indiana.
It is the great equalizer in a lot of ways, in that there are there's some people up in the pagoda that are suited up and
They
high
got,
on
they
life,
got the
but-
Kentucky Derby look to them.
Yeah, a little bit, but it's not. I was going to compare it to the Kentucky Derby, where the infield is just a mess at times there, although not nearly as much of a mess as the infield at the Indy 500. And then the bleachers and the stands and the suites, Tom Brady's got his bow tie on and all the women in their big old hats. You don't get that as much
No.
at the Indy
No.
500. Yeah, it
Cut
is.
off t-shirt, jean shorts. Yeah.
There's really nothing like it in my mind. It's 300,000 plus people. The 100th, which was 3 or 4 years ago now, I think they sold it out entirely, including the infield, which was like 350 plus. You don't get that size sporting event anywhere else. And just the masses, it's impossible to explain until you go. It's not like being at a football game and looking out through the bleachers. It's not like being at a baseball game, or, I guess you could probably compare it in a sense to some of the college football stadiums, the Big House and Happy Valley, and some of those stadiums that hold 80, 90, 100,000 people, the Rose Bowl. But even there, that's 1/3 the size of the Indianapolis 500. And so you get there and the sun's shining, and when that national anthem plays and you fly over, something else. And I miss it, and I am ready, whether it's this year or next year, to get back to full go, because it is one of my favorite days of the year. You're right about the cars. You really have to identify colors well, and you find your drivers that most of the time you have money on, and then you figure out they're driving a yellow car with a black bumper, or what's the word? Spoiler. See, I'm all in on motorsports. And then you catch them coming around turn 3 and coming down the short chute and through turn 4, and then they're gone again for 45 seconds. So it's an experience unlike any other. And unfortunately, attendance is going to be limited this year. But if you're out there listening and you've ever been thinking about making the trip, it doesn't matter if you like sports or not. It doesn't matter if you like racing or not. That has absolutely nothing to do with it. I could not care any less about IndyCar racing 11 and a half months out of the year, but you get to the back half of May here, and I'm all in on the IndyCar. Rinus VeeKay was the winner of the Grand Prix this past weekend.
Congrats to Rinus.
Yeah.
The interesting piece there, when you say it's going to be limited, to give the scope, it is going to be limited. I still think they're allowing somewhere between 130 and 150,000 people. So that's what limited capacity looks like.
Yeah. It's still a pretty large event. And if you are headed out to the Indy 500, I wish you the best of luck. Might have a little better luck parking this year than you have in previous years. All right. Outside of that, what else we got going on?
I'm curious, while I have you here.
Go ahead.
What are you reading? Many times when we have our leadership events and we talk to our participants, we really focus on the art of reading, whether that's articles, books, whatever your flavor, but ways to continue to better yourself. And too many times it takes until we become a full-fledged adult before we understand how critical reading is and how impactful reading is for our personal and professional development. Curious, what books are you reading right now, or what books even do you plan to read as we head into the summer here, where we can really better ourselves? Some summer off-season training, my man.
Well, I will start with this. I am a very bad reader of books, not in the sense that I can't read. I can read proficiently. I will get in on a book and I'll go all in on it. I'll read it, I'll sit down, I'll comb through 10, 15 pages every night for 2 or 3 weeks. And then I don't know if I lose interest. I don't know if I get sidetracked. It would.
You have the attention span of a gnat.
It's not even that necessarily. I start books, I get really excited about them, I go all in on them, and then I just stop. And so I have a number of books that I'm 40 to 60% of the way through that I just need to go and pick them back up again, because what I'll also do is I'll get like 40, 50% of the way through a book. I'll be like, oh, there's another book out that intrigues me. And then I'll switch to that book without finishing the first book. Yeah, you're throwing your hands up. I agree with you completely.
Oh.
It's really stupid, but I'm just telling you that is for whatever reason, how
Very inefficient.
It's very inefficient, and it's highly frustrating. With
Okay.
that being said,
do you want to name the 27 books that you've read 30 pages of?
No, I don't. There are 2 books right now that I am a portion of the way through, one of which was suggested by you, of course. And that is Multipliers. It is a book about leadership, about how we can become, multipliers as leaders instead of the opposite, which is called a diminisher, and how you can work to get the most out of the people you work alongside and work with. And so there's been a lot of really good information in there. I go through, I highlight, I come by, I read most of my stuff on my iPad. So I'll highlight, and then it compiles all your highlighted notes at the end. So I'll go back and look through those. I've been pretty pleased with that one. I got away from it for a little bit. I picked it back up. The other book that I started and have stopped and now am looking to pick back up again is Killers of the Flower Moon, which is getting ready to be, it is currently being made into a movie. Everyone's favorite American actor, Leonardo DiCaprio. So Killers of the Flower Moon is about a series of murders of Native Americans living in Oklahoma who had a bunch of oil money. It's kind of, as I understand it, the portion that I've gotten through and what I know about the movie has to do with how the FBI came to be in existence, and how some of these national murder cases become centralized with the FBI. So I'm excited about that. I want to read that before the movie comes out. But the movie, Leo, Robert De Niro, Martin Scorsese, who has done a ton of work with both Leonardo DiCaprio and Robert De Niro, but the 3 of them have never done anything together, which is just really intrigues me, because Goodfellas and The Irishman recently with De Niro, and then you go back to Shutter Island and The Departed, and there's probably 2 or 3 other Leo Marty movies. Aviator, I think he did Aviator. Anyway, and then Jesse Plemons is in there as well, who I think Jesse Plemons is really, really talented young actor. So it's gonna be a great movie. Film. I'm excited for it, but I do want to read the book just to give myself some context leading into it. And with that, I will allow you to share what you're reading.
I have a number of books on the docket here. I just finished The Coaching Effect, which discusses how you can optimally get the most out of people. There's a book called Grit that I still have to get to. It's called Grit, The Power of Passion and Perseverance. There's another book called Think Again by Adam Grant that I need to get on top of. And then my wife, my wonderful wife that you know, she bought me a book. I believe the title of it's Mind Master. It's about how you can memorize even more things. And I feel like that's a talent you and I both have. Pretty good memory, but trying to take that to the next level.
Have you read 11 Rings, Phil Jackson's book?
I have not.
I would suggest that's one book I actually made it the whole way through. There's a lot of really good information in there. It's entertaining in a sense that it talks about his journey through the NBA and winning all his titles, talks about his background, his upbringing, but there's also a lot in there about how he managed the teams that he had, how he brought together MJ and Scottie Pippen. And I know some of that was covered in your favorite documentary, Last Dance.
Right, Dance.
But it really dives into how Phil got the most out of his players. What you said about coaching effect made me think of it. And, and then obviously he shifts from the Bulls, jumps to the Lakers with Kobe and Shaq. They have their whole falling out. He goes away. He comes back with Kobe again. Phil Jackson is, in my opinion, probably most people's opinion, a top 3 American sports coach of all time. And you could argue that he had some of the most talented players of all time, which is accurate, but a lot of people have talented players on their teams and can't find a way to unlock their potential and get the most out of them. And I think what I took away the most is he really, more than anything, he took a hands-off approach and he let a lot of his teams just self-manage. And then he would pick his spots. He would pick his spots to jump in, to challenge, to poke, to prod, to push. He wasn't a micromanager. He wasn't a guy who was in MJ's face every single day, telling him what he needed to do and when he needed to do it, because he knew he had guys who had that within themselves. So definitely a multiplier, Phil Jackson.
Well, that's the big piece, right? Between Kobe and Jordan, you had 2 of the, if not the 2 greatest guys who are self-starters, who are going to get in their teammates' face, who are going to push and drive. I think that's a coach, that's a CEO's dream. Epiprytanis, if you think about a president of one of our groups, that you have folks outside of the leader who are going to get going to get on each other, going to push each other, going to stretch each other and coach each other. That's what you really need in a dynamic team. So
But I think
he was lucky enough to have that.
I think the flip side of that, though, where the coach does come in, is if you have that NJ or that Kobe, they can take it too far. And it's your job as the coach to be able to temper. You think about NJ punching Steve Kerr in the face during practice, and how do you manage that? And the way that Kobe, you hear players that would come into the Lakers and Kobe would basically call him a scrub and tell him to get off, they didn't have the right to stay on the same basketball court as him. He might have been right, but also you still need the 9th, the 10th, the 11th man on the team to perform. And if the star player is openly disparaging them, that could hurt team morale. So how do you find that balance? How do you make sure that your not your low performers, but your less important players in a lot of ways are still bought in and still working toward the same goals when you have these Kobe's, these MJs, even in Shaq, much more aloof and laid back, it seems, than Kobe, which could have been a big part of their issues. But Shaq's one of the 10, 12 greatest basketball players in the history of the NBA. So how do you get the same out of them as you do out of the last guys on the bench? It was a good read. I read it 3 or 4 years ago and took a lot away from it. That's my Alex Swinson book club stamp of approval for the day.
That's great.
You're probably not getting another one for a while, so enjoy it while it lasts. All right. Anything else before we move into rule of 3 here?
Let's get into the rule of 3.
All right. So sometimes we get, we go in pretty deep on rule of 3. We really hit some thinkers, and sometimes you just want mindless fun. And this is a mindless fun one. Got to thinking about what we want to talk about. I ate some Italian food over the weekend, and I thought, you know what, let's talk a little bit about food and what we like to eat. So with that, what are your 3 favorite types of food, genres, cuisines to consume?
All right. So Italian, love Italian food. That would be one. Mexican food, phenomenal. And then I don't know how it fits in a category because it's a little different, but I would say seafood, right?
Seafood
I don't know
works,
that's
seafood's a genre.
Right. Yeah. I don't know that's not really tied to a particular country.
Doesn't have to be.
But I do love seafood.
I love seafood as well. It just missed my list. Just missed. I mean, by a narrow margin. So my 3 are number 1, barbecue. I eat barbecue all day, every day. Love it. I don't cook barbecue as much. That's as talented as I am in the kitchen. I've not mastered the barbecue yet.
My neighbor is retired, and let me tell you, he makes a great barbecue because I feel like you have to be retired. There's a lot of work, a lot of prep, a lot of letting things marinate.
Yeah, it's a full-on commitment to master barbecue. So not quite there yet. Number 2, Japanese food, specifically sushi, the noodle soups, ramen, udon, all that. I'm just all in on Asian food in general. I like Chinese food as well, but I prefer Japanese because of those few things. I tried a new little ramen recipe last week. It was pretty tasty. And then lastly, I would agree with you. Number 3 would be Italian and all of the carbs and starches and pastas. Fresh pasta. You go to Little Italy, or you go out in Chicago, New York City, find a place that's making pasta fresh, doing everything from scratch, and that is. There might not be anything better than that right there. So that would be my number 1. Let's find Zach Scott.
Let's get him.
Zach, I do believe you are away from Tampa, which is exciting in a sense, albeit the circumstances are not the best. So please do enlighten us as we talk to you right now. Where are you?
I am just outside of Pensacola, Florida. So still in the state. If you had talked to me yesterday, I could have been anywhere between Texas, Mississippi, Alabama, maybe Pensacola. So yeah, we're out on the road.
What's that drive like?
It's 6.5 hours from where we were at to get back to Tampa, and we drove, I want to say like 10 hours or just under 10 hours yesterday from where we were in Texas.
Oh, okay. I thought you were saying it was 6 hours from Texas to Tampa, and I was
no, it was
confused.
That was like 16.5 hours from
Tampa
to where we were in Texas. It's been a long weekend.
Is it just mostly flat? Nothing too exciting going on there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the highest points are some of the bridges in Louisiana. So nothing too crazy going on. Got to see old Baton Rouge and look down on the Death Valley, and at LSU's campus. So that was nice.
Hey, Baton Rouge, one of the 6 places outside of Indianapolis and Tampa that this podcast has been in the last 4 months. So
That's right.
that's exciting. Did you, so we just talked about food for our rule of 3. Both seafood and barbecue made an appearance on our list. Were you able to snag any of either of those on your journey?
Definitely barbecue. Barbecue was had. Whataburger was had. Anytime you go to Texas, you got to have the Whataburger. Yeah. So I feel like anytime you go to Texas, it's like a must that you get some barbecue.
How many tiny containers of spicy ketchup have you consumed in the last 5 days?
Only a couple. We actually we brought back some ketchup. Although you can order it online. So any of our listeners out there who are big Whataburger fans, you can order any of the Whataburger sauces that they sell. It's turned into a Whataburger ad. Sponsorship.
I do want to share a fun story, because why not? We're talking about Whataburger. Zach, you probably remember this, but it was sometime in your first year on staff, I believe. You were sitting at your desk here at 7439 Woodland Drive eating Whataburger for lunch. And I believe Brett Widner, our CFO, and myself were both very confused about how that happened and where you found Whataburger in Indianapolis. And you shared that you simply ordered an extra burger the last time you were in Texas. You flew it home with you stored it in your fridge, and then you warmed her up and ate her for lunch the next day.
I did. I think I was flying out of the Houston airport, and I can't remember if I was visiting a group or it was probably visiting my brother, because I wasn't working in the South. So yeah, at the Houston airport, they have a Whataburger. So I grabbed one for dinner. I grabbed one because it was like 10 p.m. in the airport. Grabbed one to take home with me, kept it in my bag, threw it in my fridge, brought it to work, heated it up, and it's good to go.
And it kept okay for you.
Hours.
No,
it was delicious. It was quite tasty.
Good. Well, I'm glad to hear that. That was a fun story.
I'm surprised you remember that. I know Corey had made a comment to me about it, but it's got to be something that you don't forget. But
I mean, the legend of Zach eating Whataburger for lunch one day in Indy, it'll never die.
Whataburger itself, just a great place.
Zach, we talked a little earlier in the pod about the Indy 500. Do you have any favorite Indy 500 memories that you would like to share with our listeners?
I'd probably say anytime the Grand Council come. I remember that there were some guys from USC that came by, but I don't think that this was South Carolina, by the way. And I don't think they knew who Rod Talbot was, and he was the Grand Pritus at the time. That was if Rod's listening, that was a fun memory looking back. But yeah, outside of that, I don't know that there are too many other things that are easy to recall from the 500.
There's the key right there.
Yeah. And I think Donnie wanted that kind of answer, but we'll see.
Well, yeah. So we were talking simply about not only that part of the experience, but how hard it is to verbalize and for folks to visualize how hard it is to keep track of the cars that are moving at that clip, and also how large the track is.
Well, hold on a sec. I think Zach just learned that there's cars that drive around the track at the Indy 500.
Yeah, actually, I don't think I ever once sat in the seats, but we would watch from the inside. And yeah, I mean, it's hard to describe, right? The sounds of them whizzing by. I mean, even a whizzing by is not what they do. It's like a thunderous roar, and multiply it by however many cars are still left at the track by the end of the race. And yeah, it's hard to put into words. I mean, there were commercials last night on NBCSN talking about greatest spectacle in racing, and it's really hard to describe what the Indy 500 is and how big it is too. It's a month-long festivity central, really, for the whole state of Indiana.
That's right. What's the best snake pit performance you've seen in your time?
Probably Grizz for me. I remember watching him at my buddy's fraternity house at Auburn perform for like a few hundred people, and then seeing him play at in the snake pit at the Indy 500 was pretty awesome just a few years later. So.
Well, on a more serious note, since we've joshed around for long enough here, we talked earlier about reading and books, and Donnie is much more of an avid reader than I am, but I dabble. It doesn't have to be books necessarily, but what do you do, Zach? Especially, we talked last week about home office work and trying to stay fresh and recharge. being at home, how do you keep your mind sharp? Are there books? Are there podcasts? Are there articles? Are there websites? What do you do to stay on top of that and make sure that you don't get dull in just the general ongoing learning department?
Yeah, I think the first thing is I listen to the School of Greatness podcast with Lewis Howes. I'm a really big fan. I love that guy. He's awesome. Still one of my favorite. I know I've mentioned this to y'all in team meetings, but one of my favorite podcasts of all time is his podcast with Tony Gonzalez, where he talks about what it takes to become a Hall of Famer in the NFL, right? He catches maybe, or an average receiver or tight end may catch 60,000 passes or so in their time, and he caught maybe 210,000 passes throughout his career. And he was talking about how you may catch 10 to 30 passes in a practice. He was catching 60 to 80. And that's how you get to that level. And obviously he did it for so long. But that podcast is one of my favorites. And then one that actually I was clear. From time to time, I'll post some of his posts on my Instagram story, Facebook story. And those are pretty inspirational. I know PJ and Victor follow along as well. And I think utilizing things like social media, right, where a lot of people use it as this mind-numbing get away from the rest of the world for a little bit, escape. I think there are ways that you can, if you follow the right people, you can find ways to continue to improve your game. Another guy from the School of Greatness podcast, Matthew Hussey, he's a relationship coach. I follow him. I've followed him now for, I think, since 2018 because of that podcast. And he's a really good guy to listen to about how you form relationships. And that's a really important piece for me and what I do and how I coach guys.
What was the second one you said? You cut out there for a second.
James Clear is his name.
There we go.
And he's got the 7 Atomic Habits, something along those lines. I haven't read his book, but it's been recommended by Woody. I'm not sure if Donnie's gotten around to any of those, but yeah, it was he's definitely got some good stuff that he posts on social media that you can quick little post and share and kind of read through them.
Well, big day for Victor Casanova and PJ Malafronte getting their first podcast shout outs as well. So I'm sure they appreciate it. just across the hall from me here. So I'll let them know they got the nod today.
Perfect. Tell them to make sure to listen, whether it's good or bad news, they can find out.
That's right. That's how you tease. That's teaser. All right. Anything else for Zach, Don?
No, Zach, excited. We got 2 weeks left in the year. Appreciate all the work that you're doing and continuing to coach guys up. And we've got a lot of big things I keep talking about. We got a lot of big things planned for the summer, heading into the fall. You know, we've been talking with our internally, and I think it's time to start talking externally about the 5 R's. And you know, when we think about that, that's recruitment, risk, ritual, retainment, and resourcefulness. We could do a whole nother pod on that, but obviously number 1 is recruitment and bringing in new members. It's been a year where we've not had the ability to do that in many circles, and excited to take off and get after it and bringing in new, critical, phenomenal people into our organization. So grateful for all you do, Zach.
Absolutely. Yeah, it starts now, guys. Start that recruitment now. Sweet.
Thank you, Zach. Be safe the rest of the way home. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you very much. Bye, guys.
All right, let's keep it moving here. We're going to go in, keeping the Texas flair alive, actually. We got a good friend of the pod here, Cole Connor, coming on. So I thought that it would be apt to bring in Cole to share some reflections. He just graduated, or he's graduating, just graduated, I think, from University of Houston. I know a lot of individuals out there are in the process of graduating and starting that next phase of life. So why don't I bring Cole in, just give him a chance to talk a little bit about his time in college, reflect on his time with TKE and at the University of Houston, and just, you know, bring some youth into this podcast. If you hearken back to season 1 of the podcast, you'll know the name and maybe even the face if you've seen some of the YouTube content we posted. College graduate, CAC chairman, Epsilon-Omicron. college